Tall and Small Collection, Season 2, Chapter 8, Moving into the Unknown. Soren admittedly felt slightly uneasy climbing into the much smaller box on top of the immense plastic crate holding the items the borrowers had collected these past few years. He knew Ashlynn was going to step carefully, and that it was only a temporary arrangement until they arrived at the car, or when they needed to hide. Still, willingly stepping into a lidded container felt unnatural. Maisie didn't seem to mind, though, which was probably the most important aspect of this trip. She held her bunny close and toddled from one side of the box to the other, while Soren, Dorian, and Ray did one last run-through of the apartment before heading back. Finding nothing else in their halls and rooms they made a home, the borrowers stepped into the hard plastic box. "Ready?" asked Ashlynn, before daring to stand up. Soren glanced up and nodded as he sat down and placed Maisie in his lap for the transportation portion of the ride. "Ready?" called Ray. "Let's do this!" With one final nod from Dorian, Ashlynn carefully closed the lid, leaving the edge open, and carefully stood, keeping everything as level as possible. "Moving," she warned as she began walking across the floor. Ashlynn could only imagine what it was like to see from their perspective. What was it like seeing a single step? Was it jarring? Did her even and seemingly gliding steps have a rhythm which was unsettling? Or had the borrowers simply become accustomed to the motion because of their size? Whatever the case, Ashlynn made sure she moved slower than normal and shuffled her feet rather than stepped. Even if Soren, Dorian, and Ray were used to her movements, she dared not upset Maisie. She crossed the living room and slid out of the front door before walking across the lawn to her car. She placed the larger tote in the back seat and carefully placed the smaller one into the front seat. "I'm locking everything back up. I'll be right back," she said before closing the door with a harsh push rather than letting it slam. The borrowers, on the other hand, hardly knew Ashlynn was moving. They felt a couple of jostling motions and felt the box tilt slightly, only once, before they heard Ashlynn shut the vehicle door. This would be their first car ride, and Ray intended to make the most of it. "This is exciting," he said eagerly as he dared to stand up and walk over to the slightly propped open lid. He grasped onto the side and lifted himself up slightly to peer out at the seat they were placed in. Already, he caught a glimpse of a massive stick in the middle and grates further up that were probably the source of air. Ray had no idea how such a device worked, but he was eager to learn. He started to lift himself further out of the container when he felt something bap his boot and tug downward. "Get down! You don't know who might walk by and see you if you go out there," scolded Dorian. Ray wrinkled his nose and folded his arms across his chest. "You are not the boss of me, and Ashlynn said no one was left in the neighborhood. Who's going to see us if no one is left in the neighborhood? Seriously, Dorian, chill out. Nothing is going to happen. Come on, you should be getting excited. We'll get to meet new borrowers, climb new walls, investigate new places to live. You're acting like we've been captured and are being taken to a lab or something," retorted Ray. "Hey, you two, ease up. This is going to be a long day for all of us," interrupted Soren as Maisie pushed herself up for the dozenth time already and walked across the box from one end to the other with her bunny before sitting back down in Soren's lap. "Yeah, ease up, Dorian," muttered Ray as he went back to lifting himself part way out of the box. A sudden knock on the window set all of the borrowers on edge. Ray immediately jumped down and crouched as a shiver of adrenaline shot through all of them. They held their breath for a moment before the car door opened and shut. "I'm back. Ready to go?" asked Ashlynn. All three borrowers let out a sigh of relief, feeling mildly foolish for their instincts taking over and fearing the worst. "Ready!" called Ray. "Hey, Ashlynn, could you lift the lid so I could get out?" "Sure thing, lifting," Ashlynn replied. From inside the box, they saw the partial shadow of Ashlynn's fingers crest over the edge and lift the lid off halfway before retracting her hand. Ray wasted no time in throwing himself over the ledge so he could fully see the car's interior. He looked up at all of the windows and spotted the knobs and buttons, instantly fascinated by everything. "Whoa!" he exclaimed involuntarily as he looked up at the immense seat that the box was propped up against. "This is awesome! Ashlynn, what do these things do? Do all cars look like this? I feel like I'm in an episode of that one show, with all the flashing lights and they're in space and stuff. It's an older show." Ray walked across the seat and jumped into the middle of the hard plastic between the seats, carefully avoiding the 2 holes in the middle. "Are you talking about Star Trek?" asked Ashlynn, giggling slightly as Ray proceeded to try and balance in between the cup holders to better investigate the gear shift. "Yeah, that one," grinned Ray, as he successfully balanced his way over to the surface of the strange stick that was twice his height. "What does this do?" "That is what helps direct the car forward and backward. It does other things, but that's mostly it," replied Ashlynn. Her eyes lifted up as she scanned outside the car. No one was there, but it was just a precaution. "Whoa." Ashlynn couldn't help but smile at hearing Soren's slight exclamation of awe as he peered up the ledge. Evidently, he had never seen anything like this either. "Like it?" asked Ashlynn as she glanced down at Soren. "This is definitely beyond me," muttered Soren as he evaluated the dimensions of the car. Soren, do you want me to tilt the box so y'all can get in and out easily?" asked Ashlynn. Soren thought about it for a moment before shaking his head. "No, thank you though. If Maisie starts running, she'll be unstoppable. Plus, I don't want her to slip off of the edge of the seat or anything," replied Soren. "Oh, right. Sorry," apologized Ashlynn, realizing that he would want things baby-proofed so Maisie could be safe. She made a mental note to get things like tape and possibly some hard plastic containers with low rims for play areas. "Hey, Ashlynn!" called Ray. Ashlynn looked down to see Ray attempting to climb up the knobs and buttons on the radio. Evidently, he had gotten himself slightly stuck on the rotating knob of the volume. "Could I bother you for a hand? I want to see over the ledge, please." "Sure," Ashlynn giggled, seeing the curiosity of a kitten in young Ray. She placed her hand just under him and lifted her palm until his feet were securely resting against her fingers. He dropped down just as she continued to lift until he was parallel with the dashboard. Ray, who was crouched in Ashlynn's hand, stood slowly as he got a glimpse outside. "Wow, this is crazy! Everything is huge!" he breathed. He looked at the apartment and pointed. "Is that where we used to live?" "Yeah, that's the apartment," said Ashlynn. Ray rotated around and caught a glimpse of all the other houses and apartments, as well as the road leading out of the neighborhood. "What are those? Is that what you use this thing on?" asked Ray, voice oozing with wonder. "Precisely. This car, along with all of the other cars, drive on the road, and that is the road," she said, as she smoothly brought Ray over to the driver's side window and pointed to the road. "How many cars can fit on that? One at a time? Are we going on the freeway like that one movie you showed? You know, the one that was green and they were like in a computer?" asked Ray. "The Matrix?" giggled Ashlynn. "Yeah, like that. It's not going to be half as interesting though. Freeway driving is a bit monotonous and boring." "Still, that is cool," said Ray. "Hey, do you think I could sit on your shoulder while you drive? Please, I won't pull any pranks or anything. I'll just sit and watch." Ashlynn, slightly taken aback by Ray's question, lowered her hand by the steering wheel and bit her lip as she thought. Being on her shoulder meant he could see out, but it also meant people could see in if they were paying attention. "I don't know, Ray," she said quietly. "If you're by the window, other people might be able to see you." "I'll sit on the inside and do everything you tell me. I can hide really quickly now. Please, Ashlynn?" Ashlynn bit her lip again and glanced over at Soren, who was very obviously listening. Dorian leaned forward and muttered something, obviously keeping his voice hushed. Soren nodded slowly and looked back up at Ashlynn. Ashlynn. Well, I would say you should ask Soren, said Ashlynn. I am okay with it as long as you listen when I say you need to hide. Driving can be dangerous, and there are a lot of people on the roads. Ray immediately leaned over the edge of Ashlynn's hand, propping himself up along her thumb as if it were the ledge of a banister, and looked pleadingly at his older brother. Soren, may I please sit on Ashlynn's shoulder while we drive? I won't distract or do anything crazy, I promise, pleaded Ray. Ashlynn could already see Soren was in a heavy debate with himself. He was obviously thinking hard about this. It was an unknown situation that none of them had experienced. Ashlynn was about to retract her offer when Soren nodded. Okay, but you need to listen to Ashlynn. I've never been in one of these things before. If she says to get down because someone can see you, you do it, okay? Said Soren. Ray leapt back and into the air out of pure excitement. Yes! Thanks, Soren! Easy there, said Ashlynn as Ray cheered. She had an idea and carefully transferred Ray to her other hand before reaching into the back seat and fishing out a safety pin. She opened it and pinned it right through her shirt. Okay, now you have an anchor so you won't slip. You have a string, right? Of course. What kind of borrower would I be if I didn't have some stray thread? Grinned Ray. Ashlynn watched as Ray pulled some thread out of a small side pouch and quickly tied a harness around his waist and legs. Satisfied, she raised him up to her right shoulder, where he leapt on and secured himself to the metallic pen. Soren, from down below, watched Ashlynn and Ray working together as though not a day had passed. Soren knew Ashlynn would be careful with his brother. He also recognized that Ray was getting older, and Soren would not always be able to dictate his every move. He needed to make decisions on his own and gain experiences to be a good borrower. What better way to do it than with someone he trusted with their lives? Still, that didn't stop Soren from being tense and worried for his brother. What was more nerve-wracking was his other brother, Dorian, and the look he was giving him. Soren turned to the middle teen to see the fragment of a scowl on his brow. Dorian, something to say? He asked quietly, so Ashlynn didn't hear them. You didn't listen to my other suggestion, muttered Dorian. I can't believe you let him sit up there with her, on a human shoulder. He could be seen by lots of humans up there. Soren sighed and stepped closer to Dorian. Dorian, I know this is a lot for you, and that this is hard, but I can't control the both of you forever. Ray is safe, and Ashlynn is aware enough to make sure we're protected, said Soren. He inhaled slowly and took another step, lowering his voice yet again. I know what happened was terrible, the worst, but you can't blame Ashlynn. It's in the past. Don't think I don't know the look you're giving her. It's the same one I gave your father. She, Dorian, said Soren as he placed a hand on his brother's shoulder. You can feel the way you do. That's fine. But Ashlynn isn't to blame. She risked a lot coming out here, not even knowing if we were out here, just to make sure we were safe. She didn't need to make this trip. So, you feel indebted to her. You owe her? Don't you think she'll use that? No one does something for nothing, hissed Dorian. Is that what you're worried about? Asked Soren. Dorian folded his arms and looked away. Soren wanted to figure this out all in one go, but Ashlynn's voice snapped him back to the present. I'm starting the car now. Ready? Asked Ashlynn. Forget it, muttered Dorian as he went to the corner and sat down. Ready as I'll ever be. Ready to go, Captain, called Ray. Soren sighed and walked back to the edge of the box to look into those stormy blue-gray eyes he had found refuge in so many times before. He would deal with Dorian soon, but they needed to get moving. Ready, confirmed Soren. With that, Ashlynn reached forward and turned the key. The engine roared to life, and there was a subtle tremor to the car as they rolled backwards onto the street. There was a momentary lurch before the car was set forward in motion. "Whoa, this thing is seriously so fast," said Ray, eyes filled with wonder. "We're not even at top speed," said Ashlynn. Ray, jaw slack, looked up at her and then back out beyond the dashboard to the road ahead. "This is going to be awesome," he grinned. With that, they set out onto the open road. Ashlynn, heart still pounding, took every curve and stop like she was a million years old. She dared not stop or turn too fast in partial fear of sending Ray flying off of her shoulder or disturbing Maisie, Soren, and Dorian, who were either sitting or pacing in the semi-level box in her passenger seat. They got onto the freeway and Ray could see dozens and hundreds of cars. He asked a million questions, like how many people could fit into one car, and where these people were all going. Ashlynn answered where she could, but some of Ray's questions left her curious too. At one point, when Maisie had drifted off to sleep and was snuggled on one of the packs, Soren dared to venture out of the box and roam about the vehicle. He was even bold enough to get into Ashlynn's hand while she was driving and let her raise him up to see over the dashboard to the world beyond. Soren knew borrowers were small, and that it was a big, terrifying world beyond the security of the walls and electrical wires, living by candlelight and makeshift lamps. Seeing the vast expanse of the highway and the dozens of cars that were immediately around them had never made Soren feel so small. The world was dangerous enough as it was, without having to worry about being a sturdy 4.5 inches tall. This was a stark reminder of the differences between humans and borrowers, and Soren wasn't sure how he felt about it. Soren had always been confident in himself, in his abilities, and the decisions he made, and his size hadn't really bothered him. It still didn't bother him. It was a harsh reminder, all the same. From where he was, he could see the city. Finally, after hours of traveling, talking, and listening to music, they were almost there. There was a fluttering nervousness in Soren, and he knew what he had to do to prepare. First things first, find a place suitable to live, close enough to Ashlynn to visit, while also not being an inconvenience. He wasn't sure how long it would take to set up a place, but with Ashlynn's help, it wouldn't take long. The next thing would be to make sure they had the ability to get into other apartments. They couldn't rely on Ashlynn alone for food and borrowings, even if she said they didn't need to do any of that. Soren took pride in his work and the life that gave him purpose, just like what he said years ago to Ashlynn when she initially proposed they stay together. He didn't want to live the life of a pet. However, now that he was a little older, he appreciated all of the help he could get to get Dorian, Ray, and Maisie everything they needed to live a good life. Besides, Ashlynn didn't see them like that, and that's what mattered. "Whoa!" Ray's exclamation snapped Soren from his thoughts. He and Ray had been sitting on Ashlynn's shoulder for the past hour, and Soren hadn't even noticed. "Soren, look at all of these buildings. Do they touch the sky? They're so tall." This earned him a thoughtful chuckle from Ashlynn. "No, they don't touch the sky. They are called skyscrapers for a reason, though. There are dozens of floors in some of these buildings. The one I live in is a little bit further ahead. I'll point it out when we get closer." "Neat," grinned Ray as he leaned forward, tugging at the safety pin to catch a glimpse of nearby cars. "Well, if we're almost there, we should get ready," said Soren. He pulled himself into a crouching position. "Need a hand?" asked Ashlynn as the car slowed to a stop. "Yes, please," said Soren. Ashlynn reached up her hand so Soren could step right into the embrace of her fingers and safely lowered him into the box. He slipped out easily from her grasp and hoisted himself over the ledge, seeing Dorian and Maisie completely asleep in the corner. Soren thought about waking Dorian and Maisie, but thought better of it. He would wake them when they were a bit closer. The car once again pulled to a stop before lurching forward one last time. The sun's light disappeared and left dappled shadows against the roof of the car. Ray, being able to see everything, watched as they began to ascend a weird concrete building with massive ramps. Ashlynn, what is this place? Is this where you live? Asked Ray. This? No, this is called a parking garage. This is where people put their cars, like this one. I actually live over there. Here, I'll show you. Just let me park. And the car slowed to a stop and Ashlynn turned the key, shutting off the engine, before turning her body and pointing. There. That is actually my apartment right there on the corner. See it? Whoa. Ray looked out the window to see where Ashlynn was pointing. Many floors up and surrounded by windows was a beautiful, tall building. There were rolling hills in the distance, and the city was close by. With a building as immense as this one, there had to be other borrowers living there. You like it? Wait till you see the inside, grinned Ashlynn. Now, I've got to ask if you're ready or if you need a minute before we head inside. No, I'm ready, said Ray, as he wrestled himself free from the shoulder tether and practically threw himself into Ashlynn's open palm, which was ready to catch him. Ashlynn lowered Ray to the ledge of the box, and he jumped down as quietly as he could, barely disturbing the box as he landed. Soren glanced up at Ashlynn and gave a nod of affirmation as he pulled Maisie into his lap to keep her from jostling too much. Okay, you probably know this anyway, but don't worry if you hear voices outside or if you hear me say hello to any of my neighbors. I'll let you know when we're inside safe, okay? Said Ashlynn. With one final nod, Ashlynn pulled the lid completely over the borrowers inside and pressed it down slightly so it didn't slide off accidentally. It would be just their luck that the lid would come flying off in front of everyone. Ashlynn got out of the car and retrieved the crate before setting the borrower box on top. She would have to come back for her overnight bag later. As evenly as she could, she made her way down the elevator and into the main building. The entire way, she tried keeping her hands and body from shaking. This was easily the most nerve-wracking thing she had done in years. The passage from the parking garage to the apartment was easy enough, but the moment she walked inside, she almost ran into one of the other tenants, a young, rambunctious boy. "Oh, sorry," he called as he ran for the front door. "It's all good, Sam," said Ashlynn, as she paused for a moment just inside and waited for the family to pass. "What's in the box?" asked Sam as he pointed to the crate in Ashlynn's hands. "Oh, just some supplies and groceries," lied Ashlynn. She couldn't hardly tell this child about the borrowers and their belongings in the crate. "Oh, okay," grinned Sam. His parents gave their friendly greetings, and they headed out for the day. Ashlynn hadn't made it a dozen steps toward the elevator when she heard another familiar voice. "Ashlynn, is that you?" Ashlynn felt like cursing in her mind as she turned around to see Eliza, who was retrieving her mail. Her auburn hair had been tied back into a couple of sweet-looking braids. "Hey, Eliza. Long time no see," grinned Ashlynn. Eliza chuckled and shook her head. "Nice one," she said with a sassy grin as she pointed to her clouded eyes. "You know that's not what I meant," Ashlynn scolded playfully. "I know. Anyway, I'll talk to you later. I might have an audition. I'll tell you about it later," said Eliza as she ducked back into her apartment. "Wow, congrats! I can't wait to hear about it," grinned Ashlynn as she hit the elevator button up. Thankfully, the inner mechanisms whirred quickly into action, and Ashlynn was at the door of her apartment, slipping inside before she knew it. She set down the crate and shut the door quickly, locking it behind her before going over to the top box and bringing it over to the coffee table in her apartment. "Hey, we're here, opening the lid," she said softly. She carefully stabilized the box on one side as she pried the lid free. Immediately, Ray was throwing himself out of the box. Dorian, more hesitant, waited for a moment before leaping out and darted forward behind the tissue box. Soren, on the other hand, remained in the box as he began to pry himself free from Maisie's slumbering form. "Wow, you're popular," grinned Ray as he walked along the coffee table ledge surveying the surroundings. "Who were they?" "Other tenants. They're my neighbors and building neighbors," said Ashlynn. "And it's hardly being popular. It's just being friendly." Well, you're friendly then, grinned Ray. Soren finally managed to slip out of the box and slipped over the ledge, but not before tossing the majority of their bags out onto the table. Okay, you two. We don't want to lose the daylight. Come on, grab your packs, instructed Soren. Ray and Soren immediately began strapping themselves into their gear. Lines, hooks, and pins were hooked and taped in all manner to their backpacks. Just as he finished, Soren gave a sharp exhalation and looked back into the box. Rats. I can't take all of this with Maisie strapped on. Dorian, would you be okay with carrying these lines and hooks? Asked Soren. Dorian, who had come out and strapped himself into his own gear, was about to speak when Ray spoke up, leaving them all speechless. Maisie's asleep, right? Can't she just stay with Ashlynn for a little bit? Asked Ray. Ashlynn felt like she had just been struck with a bolt of lightning. Everything in her was suddenly frozen, tingling with energy. Look after Maisie? Keep tabs on Soren's daughter? They had just met. Ray, scolded Dorian. What? She's going to be asleep for at least another half an hour. We'll be back before she wakes up, argued Ray. Ashlynn, in the back of her mind, was uneasy about watching over Maisie. Maisie was considerably smaller, and the last thing Ashlynn wanted to do was hurt Soren's daughter. At the same time, there was something about it that she was drawn to. She wanted to help Soren, and Maisie was adorable. She glanced over at Soren hesitantly, wondering what was going on in his head. Soren, at the same time, had reservations about the whole thing. Ashlynn was kind and caring and always careful when she was around them. Still, this was a lot at once. Maisie had just met Ashlynn. What if she got upset being left alone with someone she didn't know? What if she needed something? His head started spinning when he heard Ashlynn speak up. Soren, I don't want to put you on the spot or anything, but I don't mind keeping an eye on Maisie if you want. Really, it's no trouble. It'd be my pleasure, actually. But I don't want to overstep, said Ashlynn. Soren folded his arms and placed his right hand by his lips. Ashlynn said she didn't mind. Soren didn't want to bring Maisie into unknown rafters, and she would be safe here. Soren bit his lip and glanced back into the container with Maisie as she rolled over and continued to suck her thumb. Are you sure? Asked Soren. Of course, smiled Ashlynn. It won't be for very long. We'll be right back, reassured Soren. We'll be fine, reassured Ashlynn. Don't worry, go on. I'll keep an eye on her. With a hesitant nod, Soren finished strapping in and headed to the coffee table ledge. Thank you, Ashlynn. I promise we'll be back soon. See you then, said Ashlynn. They all waved a quick goodbye before descending the table and heading over to the wall. Ray jogged ahead and gave the electrical cover a quick tug, eyes widening as he looked over his shoulder at Soren and Dorian. It's loose, said Ray with a grin. You think? Maybe, said Soren, feeling a bit nervous now. Ray pulled out his flathead screwdriver bit and unscrewed the single notch keeping them from entering the walls. Let's not get too excited, though. It could be any number of things. Soren, said Ray as he finished pulling the electrical cover from the wall. Don't worry. Maisie is going to be fine with Ashlynn. We'll be back in no time. Soren sighed and shook his head. Ray, one day, when you have kids, I'll remember you said not to worry, said Soren, grasping Ray's shoulder. He reached up and tousled his brother's hair, to which Ray shrugged him off, and the three of them entered the walls. Immediately, they were greeted by the shadows and familiar stillness that existed between the drywall and interior beams. Dorian and Soren both pulled out their hip lamps as they checked the ground. They followed behind Soren as he began following the baseboard further into the building. As they walked, Soren noticed a distinct lack of dust between the beams. Were there other borrowers living in this building? It seemed likely. They rounded the next corner after 10 or so minutes of wandering around the labyrinth of walls and beams to begin heading across the new way when they all noticed something. It was a wire. It wasn't just an exposed wire. It was a climbing wire. "Whoa," grinned Ray as he walked up and gave it a tug. "It's still good. Should we go up?" "Worth a try," said Zoran. Ray grasped the wire in his partially gloved hands and hooked his legs around the wire and began to climb. Dorian was not too far behind him, and Zoran followed faithfully at the rear. Zoran preferred having a place in the rafters to set up a home anyway. Being under the floorboards left constant creaking and dust being knocked loose. They had just made it to the top, grabbing some secure lines, when they heard something from further down the beams. Not only did they hear something, they saw something. It was light, a whole string of lights. Cautiously, the trio approached the string of lights at the end of the way. The shadows cast around it were warm and inviting, much like their own home. They hadn't made it a dozen steps when a light from behind them turned on. The trio spun around to see the silhouettes of two individuals who also had lamps affixed to their sides. The light was lowered, and they could now see the faces of two other borrowers in their late teens, staring at them in fascination. "Well now, looks like we have new arrivals,"